From the truth about his height to his unknown romance novel, stay tuned to number 1 to find out 10 incredible things you didn't know about Napoleon. Number 10. Early life. While many of our great historical figures were helped to their status by their high-profile ancestry, Napoleon was born to a modest Italian family on the 15th of August, 1759. He was born to parents Carlo Maria di Bonaparte and Maria Letizia Ramolino, and descended from minor Italian nobility of Tuscan. Although he came from a fairly modest family, his noble, yet moderately affluent background enabled him to have greater educational opportunities than were available to others from his area. What you might not know is that Napoleon wasn't the first child of Maria and Carlo to bear the name Napoleon. His parents had a child some years before and named this child Napoleon as well, but the child died in infancy. In all, he was their third son and the second to survive to adulthood, and he also had 6 younger siblings. Although he is famous for his involvement in the French Revolution, during his younger years he was an outspoken Corsican nationalist longing to see his homeland overthrow the French rule. Number 9. Language and writing skills. Due to his heritage, Napoleon spoke and read Corsican as his mother tongue. Italian is the official language of Corsica, and it wasn't until he was 10 years old that he started learning French at school. As he became fluent in French, though, he couldn't shake his Corsican accent, and was apparently teased about it while he was at military school in France. Nevertheless, he later regarded French as his first language, which is rather ironic as he apparently never mastered French spelling. But it wasn't only these abilities, or lack of abilities, that have been remembered through history. Napoleon is also known to have very bad handwriting. Count de las Cases, a companion of Napoleon on St. Helena, the island that he was exiled to by the British, noted that he left a great deal for his copyists to do, and that he often couldn't decipher his own writing. Cases stated Napoleon's handwriting actually formed hieroglyphics, so it's no surprise he, or his copyist, couldn't decipher it either. Napoleon himself even acknowledged his poor handwriting, telling Dr. O'Meara that he previously had a habit of writing only half or 3/4 of a word, and even sometimes ran one word into another, which meant that only those who were accustomed to his manner of writing could actually understand it. Yet, he does also state that his writing did improve during his time on St. Helena, something that he attributes to not being so hurried as he was in previous circumstances. Number 8. Napoleon's romance novel. He was a revolutionary, a military general, an emperor, and a novelist. Yes, that's right, the great Napoleon wrote a romantic novel called Clisson et Eugénie at the age of 26. But before we get into the details of this gripping novel, take a moment to subscribe to our channel and like this video. You know you want to. The inspiration for Napoleon's novel is the young soldier's love affair with Bernardine Eugénie Désirée Clary, whose sister married his brother Joseph. The story was written before his marriage to Josephine and before he made a name for himself by stopping a royalist coup in Paris in 1795. Unsurprisingly, the novel was never published and only came to light after his death when his possessions were scattered as souvenirs. Thankfully, the scattered pieces have since been copied and merged back together and were first published in French in 2008 and translated and published into English in 2009. So if you want to read a romance novel by a famous military leader, you can buy yourself a copy on Amazon. Number 7. Napoleon's Height. Perhaps one of the biggest myths about Napoleon is that he was short. This myth prevailed into the 20th century, where his name was given to the psychological complex specific to short men. The Napoleon complex, or also known as short man syndrome, has to deal with a feeling of inadequacy which can come from a lack of height, or a perceived lack of height. So how did this rumor start? Well, it's likely thanks to the English propaganda, which depicted the general as comically short in critical cartoons during the Napoleonic Wars. Ironically, this rumor was further confirmed by a height measurement taken at the time of his death by a physician who noted a height of 5'2". However, this was a French measurement and apparently equals 5'6", a height which many historians state was normal for the era. Number 6. Finding the Rosetta Stone. Although he is remembered as a military leader and emperor, Napoleon liked to dabble in a variety of fields, and he also liked to consider himself a scientist, and was elected member to the National Institute, a post-revolutionary scientific society in France. Perhaps one thing that is often overlooked is his army's involvement in finding the Rosetta Stone, the granodiorite stele inscribed with 3 versions of a decree issued at Memphis, Egypt in 196 BCE during the Ptolemaic dynasty on behalf of King Ptolemy V, and was instrumental in deciphering ancient hieroglyphics. Napoleon's campaigns in Egypt are attributed with starting the burst of Egyptomania that swept Europe, especially France. Numerous technical experts accompanied the army on its campaign, and Captain Pierre-François Xavier Bouchard discovered the inscribed slab during the demolition of an ancient wall in the city of Rosetta, and immediately recognized the potential significance. Upon Napoleon's surrender, a dispute arose over the fate of the French archaeological and scientific discoveries in Egypt, and the stone then changed to English possession, and it can today be found in the British Museum in London. Number 5. Military leadership. Napoleon is often referred to as one of the greatest military leaders of the modern age. But how accurate is this statement? He expanded the conquests of France from its revolutionary borders to that of an empire that stretched from Spain to the steppes of Russia. Many argue that he was a military genius in the strategic and tactical handling of armies. However, what you might not know is that some historians have argued that he wasn't all that great. In particular, as the years progressed, his personality changed, which ultimately influenced his military decisions. Some argue that he became more irrational and subject to delusion, and ultimately developed an insatiable lust for power that caused ceaseless demands on the resources of France. Others have argued that he was often simply in the right place at the right time, or that it was his military generals who helped maintain his success. There is no one simple answer to this question. While there is clear evidence to his successful career, there are also other aspects that bring into question his greatness. Number 4. Changing ages on marriage certificates. Napoleon met and married his first wife, Josephine de Beauharnais, when he was only 26 years old. She was a widow and 32 years old. Josephine is believed to have barely escaped execution when her previous husband was sent to the guillotine, and she was imprisoned in Les Carmes as the revolution swept through Paris. After the death of her first husband, Josephine quickly became a popular socialite, which meant she was experienced and established in French society by the time she met Napoleon in 1795. What you might not know is that when Josephine and Napoleon married, she is reported to have knocked off 4 years from her age, while Napoleon added 18 months to his, with the aim of making them roughly the same age. On paper, of course. In a tragic turn of events, the age difference between them might well have been a contributing factor in Napoleon's need for a divorce. Although he reportedly still loved Josephine, after time it became clear that she could not have a child, and, in the interest of France, he had to find a younger wife. Even after his divorce, he insisted Josephine retain the title of Empress, and he was rumored to have said of his second marriage that he had married a womb. Number 3. No pigs called Napoleon. The next entry on this list is by far the shortest we've included, but it's one that must be included in this video as it is perhaps one of the strangest factors associated with Napoleon. There is a strange law in place in France which prohibits anyone from naming a pig Napoleon. However, this didn't stop author George Orwell from doing so in one of his works, and the name was changed in the first French translation, although it was changed back in later translations. Number 2. Attempted suicide and exile. It is well known that Napoleon was first exiled to Elba, a Mediterranean island with 12,000 inhabitants. But what you might not know is that, upon hearing of his fate to be exiled, Napoleon attempted to take his own life with a pill that he had carried after nearly being captured by the Russians during his retreat from Moscow. However, Napoleon survived the suicide attempt because the pill's potency had decreased over the years, and he was exiled as planned. Cut off from his family and contacts, and aware that he would soon be banished to some remote island in the Atlantic Ocean, Napoleon made his escape and managed to make it all the way back to France. Yet, luck was not on his side, and after his brief return to power, Napoleon was defeated at Waterloo and forced to surrender to the British captain of the HMS Bellerophon, and was subsequently exiled to St. Helena, where he is reported to have lived in poor conditions. Although there are many rumored rescue attempts, some apparently involving boats and balloons, none were taken too seriously, and he lived out the remainder of his days on the island. Number 1. Death. As with many important historical figures, there has been a lot of debate around Napoleon's death. As has already been highlighted, it was well documented that his living conditions in the time leading up to his death were not of a good standard. His physician even reported the dangers of his living condition and Napoleon's declining health to his captors in London. However, little was done. Some even argued that the English were trying to hasten his death. He later died on the 5th of May, 1821, and his apparent last words were, in French, France, the army, head of the army, Josephine. His physician recorded stomach cancer as the cause on his death certificate, a diagnosis that seemed to be supported by stomach cramps he experienced in the lead-up to his death. However, for decades and centuries after his death, some believed arsenic poisoning was the actual cause. While some believed that this was a deliberate action, others argued it was caused by copper arsenide in the wallpaper at the Longwood house. However, recent studies in 2008 and 2009 have reaffirmed the original diagnosis, stating that while there were high levels of arsenic recorded in the samples of his hair, these had acclimated since he was a young boy, something which was actually common at the time due to glues and dyes. What do you think is the most fascinating fact about Napoleon? Let us know in the comments below and take care!